The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone, to the Nonprofit MBA podcast. I'm Stephen Halasnik, and I've been hosting this show for 6 years now, and I enjoy every moment of it. I really feel like with the great guests we have like today, that if you just listen to a lot of these podcasts, it's really going to help your organization. And why do I do this? Well, our company is the number one provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits in the United States. It's a way for us to get back, and also a way for, of course, to tell you about our product. Lines of credit are very, very hard for nonprofits to get through a traditional bank. There's a multitude of reasons, which it's not worth me going into why. But that's something that we do really, really well at, and we prove them all the time. And if you're interested, please feel free to visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with David Rode from .org. David Rode founded, led, and scaled an organization called Pitch In. It's for baseball and softball, and an organization that helped over 1 million children in underserved communities here in the U.S. and over 100 countries worldwide. After leaving that organization in 2019, David founded .org, a nonprofit consulting firm that focuses on CEO mentoring and coaching. He is the author of Passion Isn't Enough, a practical guide for nonprofit leaders, that was released in 2024. David, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Stephen, I'm really delighted to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too, as well. So we are going to be talking about nonprofit leadership, and the title really is Nonprofit Leadership, Passion Isn't Enough. And, I've been lucky enough to run a number of companies, and I've been lucky enough to know hundreds and hundreds of not only business owners, but nonprofit leaders. And leadership skills is really underestimated on how valuable it is to be successful. Would you agree with that?
Not only do I agree with it, it's sort of the whole premise of the book. So many people come into the sector with passion, with a focus on a particular issue, or trying to improve something within their community, but come to realize maybe after the fact that they're involved with and running a non-for-profit business, and that business requires a lot of skills and a lot of challenges that they're going to come across, and they need to navigate those successfully in order to help their organization achieve its goals. So I firmly believe in that premise of the question.
Yeah, and you think about it, like I think most people, if you would say leadership is the key to success, they would think, oh, well, it's the leadership style, but it's not true at all. Leadership is about knowing what to work on, knowing what to prioritize, knowing when to say no to certain things, knowing who the right people are to hire, knowing the structure of your organization, building processes and procedures, knowing, it's leadership. If we just replace the word leadership with experience, although you certainly can get a younger person who's a good leader, but most likely leadership comes down to if you've done it before. Right, because I guess what I'm trying to say, David, is it's a very deep conversation when it comes to leadership skills.
Well, right. So I think it is a very important delineation between leadership style and leadership skills. Leadership style is everyone has a different style. There is no right way, and I think there are traits and there are characteristics. And we can talk about some of those, because I think there are clearly some things that the leaders that I've engaged with, the successful ones, have in common. But in terms of a style, you don't need to be the most outgoing person, or you don't need to be this, or you don't need to be that. You can adapt your style. But I think it does come down to a lot of the things that you highlighted. Does your organization have a focused plan of what it is trying to accomplish? And are you disciplined about the things that you are using your limited staff resources and limited budget to accomplish? Are you, as a leader, inclusive in terms of making sure you're getting the right people at the table to have the right conversations around these things? Is your board engaged and functioning properly? All of these things that you've referenced are 100% the case. When you look at the traits of leaders, I think leaders could, develop more and need to be particularly good. They need to be resilient. They need to be problem solvers. I think there's a certain level of optimism and confidence that people need to project because people do look to them as the person who's in charge and want to know that the organization's got a plan and that this person is helping to steer the ship. So I've seen very successful leaders that are younger people. I've seen people that have been doing it a long time not do it well because they have just bad habits and they've been doing the same wrong things for a really long time. So I don't think it's a function of age, but I do think it can be. I do think some of these things can be learned. And that's sort of the nature of the book, which is to give people confidence, guidance, skills, specific things to consider as they enter into some of the challenges that the book presents, whether it's strategic planning or board development or fundraising or branding or hiring. All of these things are critical. You have to make these decisions. Normally in a smaller nonprofit, the executive director is doing all those things. There's not an HR department. There's not this, there's not that. You're kind of, the expression, you're wearing all the hats. You are wearing all the hats.
Yeah. I had to laugh a little bit because I was thinking back to, when I developed as a leader, and I still am, but when I recognized that it was something I really needed to work on, this is when I was in my 30s. I'm 60 now, and I was thinking about just what came to mind was it's an older show, but if you've ever watched The Sopranos,
Of course.
and Tony Soprano is in the hospital, and I think he either got shot at I think he got shot at or had a heart attack. Yeah, I think he had a heart attack. And so he's incapacitated for a number of days. And one of his lieutenants has to take over Tony's job. And all these guys are coming to him with all these problems, right? And what you realize was how Tony was so good at his job that he made it look easy. And then when they put something else in there, he was just going crazy. It makes me laugh because it was the way I was in my early 30s. Things were coming at me from all different directions. It took me a long time to either address them or, figure out what to do. And, and over a period of times, I became a much better leader. I've said this in other podcasts before. When you're running a small organization, there are three roles at that organization. There's the leader, there's the manager, and then there's the worker bees. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of executive directors at smaller nonprofits, there are all three of those things. And it's really hard. Would you kind of agree with that a little bit?
I think it's easy to fall into that trap. I think it's also maybe a symptom that they need to reassess how they're spending their time.
Agreed.
Many times the leader can be, in many cases, I was the best one to do all of the jobs. But if I was doing certain jobs that other people could do, that was sort of meant that I wasn't doing certain things that only I could do. And I think that that's part of the challenge, is figuring out where the executive director needs to be spending their time. And it's, I don't want to, simplify the job into this time management exercise, but I did find myself needing to block out time on my schedule to do certain things. And once I did that, then I could both forget about them for a little while because I knew they were going to get taken care of. But then it was going to do them because they were on my schedule. And whether that's meet with people that are, dealing with your budget, or meet with individual board members, or do whatever the things are, a certain amount of time on prospecting new donors, whatever the challenges are, blocking out your time, because too often, and it's too easy to come in every day, turn on your computer, or you've already see on your phone on the way into work, you're taking the subway. I'm in here in New York. You take the bus, the subway to the office, if you're in an office. And by the time you get there, you realize there's all these things that are already happening by the time you're going to walk through the door. Then people are coming in and out of your office all day long. It's a distraction. You're there all day. You're busy all day. But are you really getting anything done? And I think that you can really confuse activity with production. Activity is just, running on a hamster wheel potentially. And production is moving things forward that are significant for the organization. And I think we need to be less worker bee, a certain percentage of managing for sure, because we want to coach other people. We want to elevate other people in our organization so they can take on greater responsibility. But leading is trying to setting the course, charting the course, figuring out how to deploy the energies of yourself and other key people so that the most important things are getting the most attention more of the time. It's never going to be perfect, but you want to, at the margins, be working on the big things that can help grow the organization at growth as you define it, or success as you define it.
Yeah, and I think you're 100%. I think the key is to be able to say no to either a lot of ideas that you come up with, or some things that have to get done that aren't as critical, because everybody wants to get all these different things done, and you have to really look at what makes the biggest impact on the organization. Allowing you to grow out of those 3 roles just to move into the leadership role as your primary role. That's what your ultimate goal should be, to get the organization to a point where you can have a second in command, where you can have someone in charge of fundraising, and where you can have people doing the day-to-day stuff. Do you have the book in front of you right now?
I do.
Do me a favor. Read off the chapters of your book.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite activities, Stephen. What is this? This is a setup, right? Come on.
It's your. I know. It's like
All
a child.
Chapter 1, building your strategic plan. Chapter 2, building your board. Chapter 3, building your fundraising strategy. Chapter 4, building your partnership portfolio. Chapter 5, building your financial controls. Chapter 6, building your programs. Chapter 7, building your evidence base. Chapter 8, building your brand. Chapter 9, building your communications strategy. Chapter 10, building your AI capabilities. Chapter 11, building your team. Chapter 12, building your diverse organization. Chapter 13, building your volunteer community. Chapter 14, building your crisis response. Chapter 15, building your exit strategy. And then finally, there's a chapter called Advice for New Leaders. I interviewed 22 different CEOs and subject matter experts as I wrote the book. And there were certain questions, and their responses didn't really fit neatly into any of those chapters, but I wanted to make sure I captured that wisdom. So there's the bonus 16th chapter, which is just
those are great titles of chapters, great titles of chapters. And, there's a couple of things. One of the reasons you met exactly what I was thinking. And when I go back and think about the organizations I've built over the number of years, I used to read a ton. And I used to go to some conferences. And I know my team hated when I would go to a conference, because I'd come back and I'd have a million ideas.
Yes.
And what I learned over a period of time is that, let's talk about a book first, but then we'll come back to the conferences. I would limit the amount of books I would read for business to one a year, maybe one or two a year. But then the same thing went for conferences. I would go to the conferences, but I would take a lot of notes. But at the end of the conference, I would go back and I would say, what are the top 3 things I can walk away from this conference on and say, this is what we need to do? And so it's the idea that less is more. And, what I'm suggesting to our listeners today is, I think David's book, based on just his chapters, now I haven't read it, but just based on his title of his chapters, I can't think of anything else that's really outside of those chapters that you would have to go to another book on. So just read the book and implement what David's book is about. And I did that with one book, like in particular, that I'm thinking about right now. That's different, and it's a different topic. But um, and so I think that that's very, 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 very valuable stuff. And uh, David, would you kind of echo what I'm talking about?
So, yes, and I mean, I think we do. If we can put ourselves, there's first of all, there's about 9 thoughts in my head based on what you just said. So, and they're all good. When you do go to conferences or when you're reading a book. I mean, I ordered 2 books today that are within the nonprofit sector because I'm really still curious and wanting to learn more about a couple of topics. I've ordered 3 books within the last 3 weeks, so I've got a couple of trips coming up, and I wanted to have some reading for the plane and things of that nature. But we can always learn more. And when you go to a conference, I a lot of times would go to conferences without an agenda. There were a few people I wanted to see and connect with because it was just important to see them face to face. But the most valuable things that came to me from being at a conference were people I didn't expect to meet and topics I didn't expect to be discussed. And so you need to just be out there. You need to be a sponge. And then to your point, when you come back, you need to be a filter that says, you cannot just turn this faucet on and expect the organization to start running in all these directions. You have to think logically. What can we do? What should we do? What are the biggest priorities here? So all of this stuff dovetails into strategic planning. And, there's ideas that you want to work on now. And then there's ideas like, now with calendars and other things, you can set yourself a reminder for 6 months from now to look into something because it's a good idea, but you just know it's not the right moment. So you set yourself a reminder and you can come back to it. And there's nothing worse than leading a board meeting when board members say, hey, you should contact so-and-so. Like, we should be on Oprah or we should do this or we should do that. And the answer is, I don't know. Do you know Oprah? Do you know Bill Gates? Do you know these people that you're mentioning? Because do you want me to honestly do you not think that they have 10 people between people like me and people like them? Unless you have a way of cutting the line, like that's a wasted effort. But those kinds of conversations happen all the time in board meetings. We should do this. We should do this. You should do this. And I got better at it. Turn out, do you know that person? Do you know this? I mean, it was a baseball charity. Do you know this star athlete? Do you know this agent? Do you know this broadcaster? If you do, make the introduction and I'll take it from there. But I can't get to these people on my own. So I do think we need to be careful about how many ideas we bring back to our people, because you don't want to be the idea of the month guy. You don't want to be the idea of the week person. You want to help your people stay on track and work on the right things. But it's important to recognize that a lot of the best ideas are out there, and we need to get out of our own space once in a while to hear what's happening, to see what's happening, to hear what other people are struggling with, and then figure out a way to incorporate that information and apply it into our organization in the right way. If St. Jude's is doing something, that doesn't mean that a small organization can do it. They might have a couple hundred people on their development team. You might have a part of one person working on development. So how do you take this wonderful thing that they're doing and apply it in your world where you don't have anywhere near the resources that they're throwing at the problem?
Yeah, the fun and sexy part of building a nonprofit is often the idea of starting the nonprofit, the mission you have and certainly you start to refine it. But after that, really, it comes down to exceptional execution. And there are a lot of people who do not look at great execution or exceptional execution as fun, right? There's other people like me, for example, where I really love it when I have an organization that's running really, really, really well. And I easily can get distracted by too many ideas. And so what I've learned to do is to limit, and just plan out what I'm doing. So an example would be what I often do is on a Friday at the end of the day, I put it on my calendar for 2 hours to go grab a cup of coffee or lunch. It's on my calendar automatically. And uh, at that little bucket of time, I am reviewing my strategic plan, reviewing where we are, we're reviewing where the gaps are, and not normally, maybe on a quarterly basis, implementing something else that I like. So an example would be when you were thinking of when you're telling me about the Oprah Winfrey, why don't you go, I would say, I was thinking like, well, how would I have handled that in a board meeting if I was the executive director? I think I would have, because I think that there's a lot of energy that's created with ideas, which is good. I think I might have a bucket of time when we go over our past ideas and add new ideas and then reprioritize what we should be working on. And that way, everybody can still contribute. We still can ferret out really good ideas. And then we can also talk about, getting ideas that we've had that, are we working on them? Because there's nothing worse than coming up with a million ideas and none of them get implemented.
Right. I think this is a coachable area. And so if you're trying to prospect and you're trying to grow the network, whether it's, hey, we need to attract new board members, or we need to attract new major donors, or we need to attract new corporate partners, then you can identify case studies within your organization of how it worked well. Stephen introduced me to so-and-so at this organization. So that enabled me to have a one-on-one with them. Then I was able to then set up an in-person meeting where I was able to do this, and this. And then, of course, I kept Stephen in the loop. Stephen's a really busy guy, but he made that critical introduction. He knew somebody there, and that's really the key. He opened the door so that our organization could carry our message forward. And you need to coach them on the importance of being a connector. And this starts, in my mind, as it relates to board members, on how you vet board members. This needs to start about setting expectations before they even become a member of the organization. And we talk a lot about that in chapter 2 of the book. What are you asking them to do? If you're asking them to fundraise, then do they have experience fundraising in the past? Do they understand what's going to be expected of them? Do they know what time is going to be required of them to support the organization in the way that you want board members to show up? So all of that is about setting expectations. As it relates to the other thing that you mentioned, which is really interesting, execution and executing with excellence. I used the phrase executing with excellence frequently when I was running pitching for baseball and softball. And to me, that was really about, we knew our lane and we stayed in our lane. And there were a lot of different ways that we could have broadened the organization to help kids play baseball and softball. But we knew that what we were the best at in the world was providing equipment and uniforms to under-resourced communities. It's not that fields weren't important. It's not that coaching wasn't important. It's not that other things. We just weren't the best at those things. And so I would figure out a way to refer them to other organizations that could help people do that. I knew that we stayed here. And by staying in our lane, we were able to develop this incredible proficiency about doing the kind of work we did. And I think organizations that understand who they are and sort of are comfortable in their own skin and can define themselves really clearly, that's how you build a brand over time. That's how people understand how you're making a difference in the community. And it's organizations that sometimes do a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this. They lose their identity. And people are running around everywhere without accomplishing as much as they could if they all stayed together around their central mission. So I think that kind of discipline's really the word, Stephen, that sort of underlies all of this stuff, that if you are a disciplined leader in a disciplined organization, you can get more done and more of the right things done.
As a coach and as a consultant for nonprofit leaders, what do you see the tendency are of new clients that come in to see you? What are they typically asking for?
Great question. It is the sort of the through line of those conversations, which was the impetus for the book and really the structure of the book. But those first three chapters, strategic planning, board engagement, and fundraising, those are the big three. That's what people are coming to me for. That's what people are coming to consultants generally for. And those are the big levers I think that we can help move. Some of the other chapters are critically important to other things that you encounter once in a while. But those three are sort of like ongoing and sort of foundational. So I would say, help on strategic planning, how to think through that process. Can they do it internally? Do they need to bring in an outside consultant? From a board engagement perspective, this whole notion of not everybody's engaged, not everybody's fundraising, not everybody's this, not everybody is that, and providing a lot of guidance around how to correct that. And then on fundraising, it's really, in many cases, and you're seeing it now, especially with the current environment and sort of the chaos that's being created around government funding, or the freeze that's around government funding, is organizations need diversification when it comes to revenue streams. They can't be reliant on one or two funders or one type of funding. You can get away with it, and you can maybe get away with it for a period of time, but the healthiest organizations have a pie chart, and there's a certain percentage that's coming in from grants. There's a certain percentage that's coming in from major donors. There's a certain percentage that's coming in from corporate support. There's another piece of the pie that's maybe board support, and then there's grassroots donors. All of those things working in some concert together is really, to me, the kind of framework for a healthier fundraising strategy. So those areas are the things that people are coming to me for.
So at the time of this recording, which is March 3rd of 2025, what's happened in the last 5 weeks, I guess it's 5 weeks now, has been I'm just repeating it. I'm sure everybody knows it now, but may not know it 3 years from now when they re-listen to, when they listen to this podcast again, because we do get a lot of people doing that. The government, the federal government, has stopped funding immediately and breaking contracts in regards to certain funding of nonprofits. Now, I'm curious to hear from you what you're hearing from your clients that are nonprofits. What are their boards saying? What are the executive directors saying? What are you hearing out there?
Yeah, it's a complicated time, and I think there is many organizations began their planning or scenario planning well before the new administration came in. There were organizations, depending on what part of the sector you were in, if you were involved with immigration or you were involved with LGBTQ plus community or certain other sectors of the nonprofit world, you had a sense, very clear sense, that your organization or your type of work might be, there might be a target on it. And so I imagine those organizations were really communicating. I mean, the ones I saw that were doing a good job of it were communicating more clearly and more frequently to their community. This is who we are. This is the impact we're having. We're not going away. We're doing this. We're doing that. It doesn't have to be a fundraising request, but it is sort of reminding people of what they're doing. And then sometimes that did spur on a significant increase in support for them. So that was certain members or certain sort of silos within the nonprofit sector. What's happened since the administration came over is more broad, is really a big jolt to the ecosystem of the sector. And I know that there's a lot of leadership that's happening in the court system and other things to help try to get this funding freed back up. But I know that boards are meeting more frequently. I know that organizations there's hiring freezes or there's layoffs. There's organizations that are either consolidating or looking to consolidate. It's not a lot of organizations have the kind of working capital or funds available to go a sustained period of time without money that they were expecting. And so it is really, and organizations like yours that provide lines of credit, I'm sure you're well aware of how this is playing out, because I'm sure your phone's ringing more frequently as a result of this. And if it's not now, it will be in the very few weeks lying ahead. So I think there is, I'd say the word I've heard the most is chaos. I mean, in terms of the LinkedIn community I'm part of, and as well as the individual conversations I have. And I think people are really looking at how they can diversify their funding, how they can get more unrestricted funding, how they might be able to get funding from other funders sooner in the calendar year to help bridge some short-term needs that they have. It's a challenging time.
Are you seeing outside of the target industries that the federal government has shutting down, the ones you mentioned, diversity, equity, inclusion, LGBT, uh, uh, I'm trying, there's a number of other ones.
Of course.
Are you seeing nonprofits that are outside of those areas?
Yes.
What's happening with them?
A lot of the same things, because if you're providing services, generally providing services, you're a service organization, a human service organization that's receiving a significant portion of your funding from the government, then you are in panic mode in many situations. So it's well beyond some of the initial elements of the nonprofit sector that we've highlighted. It's expanded to education. It's expanded to a lot of other things, and I think that's because of the fact that there is just a clear sense that not only is this happening now, but this might be happening for the foreseeable future, and they have to course correct. And I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the economy. I think it's going to have a negative impact. I don't know what's happening. There's layoffs, considerable layoffs, especially for groups that are involved with advocacy and things of that nature in DC. So that the Washington, DC sort of sub-economy is in turmoil. I don't know where it's going to shake out. I think that there is going to be a relaxing of some of these executive orders and maybe some resolution around some of them, but I don't think things are going to go back to where they were before. I hope it gets to a state of normalcy, because mostly what is difficult for people to navigate is uncertainty. Even if I knew that if I was going to get $10 and now I'm only getting $2, and I knew I was getting the $2, I could plan accordingly. But if I don't know if I'm getting any dollars at all, and I don't know for how long that's going to be, then that's very difficult for me to navigate. And I think this uncertainty is maybe the biggest challenge.
What are you seeing with pass-throughs? So where the federal government has agreed to a contract but is paying it through the states and to an organization, to a nonprofit that's not their big hot buttons of diversity, equity, inclusion, or whatever. Are you seeing that the federal government is less likely to stop those grants because the state is involved and the state's made a commitment to the nonprofits?
I don't want to profess to have the clearest lens on all of that.
Gotcha.
What I will say is the following, that there are contracts, there are things that are happening now. I mean, historically, the government pays slowly anyway. Yeah. So, when organizations that are heavily embedded with government grants, whether it's city, state, or federal, they're always challenged for cash flow, because many times they're performing, at a certain period of time and getting paid 60, 90, 120 days after. And so that exaggeration of chasing cash flow to enable them to do the next thing, because the money they're receiving is for services they've already been provided in the past. That bridge is going to probably widen. I don't know that contracts aren't being broken at this time and the pass-through has changed for state and local, but it is reasonable to think that could happen. And it is also reasonable to think that could happen unevenly. This administration has been known to play favorites with certain states and cities, and so it's feasible to imagine that certain folks might end up keeping their place in the line, and other people might end up losing their place in the line based on those relationships or the combative nature that certain states might have with the federal government, or differences of opinion. So I don't think we know how it's going to really play out yet. It's a little too early.
Well, listen, this is self-serving, but if I'm running a nonprofit, there's ever time to get a line of credit in place, just in case, it's now. I'll be honest with you.
That's right. You don't need to exercise it,
no,
but but if you have it, it's a critical. And I Pitch In for Baseball had a line of credit. We only used it for sometimes a few weeks a year, but it was nice to be able to push that button so that we knew that things could keep on sailing, and we knew that other money that was coming in. But we had a couple of little windows during the calendar year where cash flow just wasn't there to support some of our things, and we knew the cash was going to come in big buckets a little bit later to more than take care of it. And so, a line of credit was just sort of smart business, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of, giving yourself flexibility. And I think that's prudent. That's just good leadership. That's good management. And I think it's worthwhile for people to at least pursue and understand what it would mean for them.
I agree. And I've had lines of credit for my own businesses multiple times. So you're preaching. This is one of the reasons why I started this with, my business partners, because of the reason that, I knew how valuable a line of credit was and how hard it is to get it through community banks or national banks. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank so very much David Road from .org for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend, and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you like today's podcast, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps us get the word out. We're in the top 1% of listened to podcasts in our space. And it's those reviews that really, really help us. And we've been doing this a while, and we appreciate those reviews. If you are looking for a line of credit, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And David, if anyone wants to reach you or get your book, how would they go about doing that?
David Road is very easily findable on LinkedIn. That's the easiest place to find me. The book, Passion Isn't Enough, A Practical Guide for Nonprofit Leaders, is available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll have no trouble finding out ways to buy the book. And I do want to hear from people that have read the book. I want them to share their feedback with me. I want to know what's working well, and I want to know that it's really been a resource that's valuable in helping them to achieve their goals for their organization. So, Stephen, thank you so much for the conversation today. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it was great for me too. And just for our listeners, David's last name is spelled RHODE, and his website is dot.org. So I want to thank everybody for listening today. And I always end the podcast this way. I've done it for 6 years. I want to thank you all for trying to make the world a better place. We all need to do our part. I know David's probably doing his part. I know I'm trying to do my part. But you guys are out there in the front lines every single day. I thank you for that. And you just got to keep in mind that saving the world is a marathon and not a sprint. And so you have to be really careful with burnout. It's very common in this industry. And, the way you do that is you think of yourself first, because you are no good to your employees. You're no good to your family. You're no good to your friends, and you're no good to your cause if you're burnt out. So make sure you're doing the things for yourself every day that makes you stay sane and keeps your energy level up. It could be exercising. It could be eating right. It could be praying or meditating. It could be going for a nice walk on a nice sunny day. You need to think of yourself first, and then you can help save the world. So please keep that in mind. I want to thank you for listening today, and have a fantastic day, everybody.